Hey everyone, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today we're going to talk about the APOS Caspian, a $500 open back dynamic headphone from apos.audio, which is a website and retailer of other products I've reviewed in the past. I've started using APOS more because it's a trustworthy site to work with, at least for the stuff I've covered. They have a pretty generous return policy, but you also know you're getting authentic stuff because with Amazon, I've had a couple issues. As you know, I have a problem and I purchase a lot of stuff. I've had issues in the past with Amazon not sending me genuine things or having warranty issues. So places like APOS kind of help. And especially if it's the same price, you can't really go wrong. So the Caspian is unique because even though APOS is a retailer, this is their product. It's a first party product, and they were, at least some of the people involved with APOS Audio were involved in the development and creation of this headphone, which I understand has been out for a year now, but I wanted to kind of do a new perspective on it and listen to it because, especially with the way manufacturing goes, sometimes things change. So I figured a fresh take will help. Huge thanks to APOS for sending me this for review. It won't affect what I say about it, but I want to be honest and share that with you all. You'll see later in the review, I'm going to point out things I like and don't like anyway, but I just want to do full disclosure. I will have purchase links in the description below if you decide to purchase this. And if I talk about other specific source gear or other things, I'll have links in the description for that as well. So with that being said, let's kick it off with what you get in the box. So inside this box, you get this package here, which is basically a sleeve kind of explaining the history behind Caspian. I'll touch on that in a moment. And then this really nice carrying case, which fits a few other headphones. If you are looking to travel and you have a collection already, some other headphones may fit as well. This also has this nice little shoulder strap if you want to basically wear it like a satchel, and then you have this little stretch sleeve on top to kind of tuck the wire in. The wire fits on either one of these just fine. And then of course you basically just drop the headphone in, which with the wire I'm not going to attempt. Now, really quick, I will have a link in the description below for the blog post because APOS had a very lengthy write-up on the whole concept behind the Caspian, how it came to be, who they worked with, which I think some people will already know. This came from a collaboration with Kennerton. Basically, these are 50 millimeter graphene coated drivers, very easy to drive, 32 ohm, 115 decibel sensitivity. But I don't want to spend too much time on the backstory. I'll sprinkle out different tidbits throughout the video, but it does have an influence on how this was designed. Some of the stuff is shared, and you can see that this has some similar designs to other Kennerton products historically, but the headband's kind of unique. The headband actually kind of looks like the Cloud 2 gaming headset with this knuckle, or the buckle the way it is, the leather pad, and then this aluminum fork with the hinge design. It's very, very similar to some HyperX stuff. So I don't know if it's the exact same. Obviously the material's a little bit better. I feel like this padding is a higher quality, but I think the frame design is similar. I never really had a problem with that, and the clamp force is actually quite light as well. Now, looking a little bit more closely at the Caspian, there's a few things I want to point out. So both ear cups are made from the same piece of oak, and then obviously it's stained and finished with this glossy material. It's not like a furniture grade perfect finish. There are some irregularities in the clear coat, but it's kind of unique. So even though they do match the wood because it's made from the same piece, as you look at a larger piece of wood, it's not going to look identical throughout because the grain can get kind of unique. So, but they do have some bit of a matching here to kind of minimize the effect of having two totally different pieces of wood. It would be more jarring if it was separate. Then when you look at the ear pads, these are real sheepskin ear pads. They may not look like much at first, but it's not PLU or synthetic leather. So they feel incredibly soft and comfortable on your ear. They're much softer than synthetic leather, so you can tell when you wear it. And then it has a very plush memory foam. Looking at the dimensions, you have a height of just under 65 or right about 65 millimeters. And then if I look at the width, which admittedly is going to be a little bit of a challenge here, I'm going to try with the headband flex, we have about 40 millimeters of width. Now the depth isn't bad, but it's not very deep. It's actually under 20 millimeters. We are pushing closer to about 16 millimeters of depth. This center pad is the center baffle, you could say, has a pad. It really is just an acoustic fleece material that's probably only a millimeter thick. It's not really padded, but I think they actually use it more for tuning than they do for comfort improvements. Now, what I love about the Caspian is the mini XLR connector. This is a 4-pin XLR. Very much universal, no proprietary stuff here. There are so many cables you can buy online. Now, I want to point this out because, to be fair to APOS, they actually have a pretty highly rated cable called the APOS Flow cable, which they bundle. So you can buy this headphone for $4.99, or when you check out, if you click on the drop-down menu, there's a Flow cable option where you can choose different terminations, whether you want your balanced, your full XLR, 4.4 Penacon, etc. So you can pick those, or again, because it's universal, if you already have one that you like, or you want to shop for different colors or lengths online, you can always do that. So I do like the connector. And on that note, I might as well just jump straight into this. They positioned this connector perfectly for microphonics. I'm not even checking, I guess, which one is which. I should. There is a label on the included cable, which is a nylon braid. It's not a bad length, 1/4 inch jack or 6.3 millimeter. So when you connect these mini XLR cables though, I want to show you this. The angle that it puts the cable is far enough forward where there is really zero chance of microphonics. It's like suspending it. So if your amp is on the table, which most people will listen to these with an amp, it is basically out of the way and I get zero microphonics issues. I did like rub it against my shirt as if, if I had a DAP in my pocket or something like that. And again, there's still no microphonics. I was concerned because I thought this material would be kind of noisy. There's nothing. This is an excellent cable, not only from a microphonic standpoint, but when you pair that with the way these are angled, I have no discomfort with the cord constantly brushing up against my shirt or my shoulders either. Now this headphone's about average when it comes to weight, and that's partly due to the use of materials. So you have real leather, which has a little bit of weight to it. You have a stainless frame, you have real wood, you have a memory foam pad. All these things combined are going to increase the weight a little bit, but even so, we're at about 396 grams. So it's not terribly heavy. You do feel the heft to it. I think this is right about the ideal weight for me for an audiophile headphone, because the only downside with some of the all plastic builds is they can feel a little bit cheaper even if they sound excellent. So there is some good weight here, but it's not so much where it's really hurting comfort. The headband padding is fine for me. Obviously I don't wear a hat when I listen to it, but it's soft and supple enough, not overly thick or weird feeling or anything like that. And there's no hard points either. When it comes to ear comfort, I don't have large ears. They're relatively flat, so the depth isn't so much an issue for me, although I can still feel my ears touching the baffle a little bit. Sheepskin is good for longer listening sessions, although any kind of a fabric material or velour is typically a little bit better. These do get a little warm after 2 to 3 hours of listening, but that's kind of normal with this kind of pad. The benefit of using a sheepskin pad like this is I get really good seal and bass performance as a result. So we're going to talk about sound quality here shortly, but overall, between the pad compliance with the pad material and density that they picked, the medium to lighter clamp force considering the weight, it is still secure. I can look down, I can do this, and it's not falling off my head or shifting. But there's no really strong clamp either. I can wear this for a long period of time. Part of what the philosophy behind the Caspian was for long listening sessions and comfort. That was a huge reason for both the build choice, the materials, the clamp, etc., but also how they tuned the audio. So let's talk about how it sounds. Now, getting into sound quality, I want to talk about objective performance first, because I have a measuring rig using Gross Pinaclones, and I can measure both the left and right driver for matching as well. So I like doing this because it takes away my own opinion, and you can kind of, compare it to other stuff I've measured. Usually when you're comparing measurements, look at measurements from the same measuring rig, because that's a better, I guess, representation of how one headphone or headset compares to another. So in this case, I did measure it, and my results are a little bit different than what APOS claims they were going for. So normally I would just side with, manufacturer claims to an extent, but this is why we measure, because my ear didn't quite hear it the same way they were claiming it to sound. And it's not to say it's a bad thing, but it just didn't fully agree with what I was expecting. It was more forward in one particular area. So here is an overlay of my measurements that I took. And as you can see, the bass tuning for an open back headphone is quite nice. There is a little bit of a lift. It is emphasized in the sub bass region, and it does kind of peak right around 45 hertz. So there's a lot of depth and warmth to the bass. I'm going to talk about how this translates to subjective sound and how I hear music with it. But I want to start with this. The bass roll-off isn't that bad either. It actually carries most of the deeper bass in the lower frequencies. There is a little bit of a valley, you know, when you go from like 300 hertz to about 1.5 or 1 kilohertz, I should say. It kind of has a gradual downward slope, but not overly so. It's not too recessed. Then you have a more dramatic peak. Now this is where my measurements differed than what I expected from the APOS site. So from 1.5K to about 2.5K kilohertz, there is a big spike that happens. It lifts quite a bit, and that's the most emphasized area of sound reproduction on the Caspian for my particular unit. It does dip in the 3 and 4 kilohertz region, just like they advertised, because they wanted to reduce listening fatigue, and it lifts back up as you get to the higher frequencies, just not as much as some people expect. If you tend to like a very bright and airy headphone, or if you're the person who every time you buys a headphone you turn up the treble because you feel like it's lacking, the Caspian out of the box is not quite that headphone for you. It's not designed to be a very bright and airy sounding headphone. And I will say this, usually you can EQ a little bit into this to kind of bring some of that back. This does not emphasize treble EQ as much as some other headphones. It's not necessarily a bad thing. The whole point of this review is to point out where the strengths and weaknesses are, at least what the character is of this headphone, so you know what to expect and what you can get out of it later. So that is how it measures. Let's talk about how it sounds. So starting with the bass is emphasized, but not as much as I expected. I thought, based off the reputation of this, that it would be like really, really strong. And it is lifted, and it is noticeable compared to something like a Sennheiser HD6XX or 650, or even when you compare it to the HD560S. This has a nice, warm, cozy bass note to it. It's not as emphasized as the Meze 99 Classics, however. So even though this is an open back, it's the way it's tuned, it's kind of a softer, cozier presentation of bass. It's like a gentle hug delivery. It's not really hard hitting. There were a couple songs like Oxycontin from Billie Eilish where they were surprisingly fast. Like that song has a very hard, tight hitting bass. So I turned it up, and they kept up really well. The bass texture, though, and the general characteristics of this bass, it better presents itself when you have a softer, deeper sounding bass. Jazz music, certain EDM, certain hip hop, rock that is using bass guitars, those types of things greatly shine through on this. Whereas something that's produced to be a little bit leaner on the bass and more forward in the upper mid-range, it doesn't quite lend itself as well to the bass presentation. So if you want really tight, dynamic, punchy bass, this may not be the best choice. It's a softer, again, cozier presentation. I think even the bass is designed to be a little bit less fatiguing because it's not overly hard-hitting in any particular area. Now, from the blog post from APOS, they wanted to create an intentional valley in the mid-range. It's recessed by about 5 decibels compared to the bass and their general ramp up into the upper mids and treble region. I've experienced that for the most part. Now, the bass does kind of bleed in a little bit to the mids. It's not creating a boxy muddiness sound, but it's definitely a warmer presentation. I like what it does with certain female vocals because some female vocals on an overly analytical, neutral sounding headphone can sound a little bit sterile or too light. Like, yes, it's clean and you hear every nuance, but to me it doesn't feel as natural as having just a little bit of bass energy that I typically look for. So I like that it's tastefully done. Again, I think with the way they're trying to present the sound, it makes sense. It's just colored, and don't expect it to sound exactly close to reference sound. Now, my issue is when it ramps up in the 2 to 2.5 kilohertz region, it's quite dramatic. Now, thankfully, they don't scoop the 1K like someone like Hi-Fi Man does to create a wider sounding soundstage. It's a nice gradual ramp up. So there's no really odd like dip of certain notes and then something just hits you in the face. It's just that certain songs that are heavily emphasized in that 2K region can sound a bit forward. Like vocals can really jump out depending on the frequency. The song Any Way You Want It from Journey, for example, is not a bass-heavy track. It's very much focused in that region, and as a result, it comes across a little bit abrasive and harsh for me to listen to, and I couldn't turn that song up as much. However, if I listen to certain jazz tracks or something that's a little bit softer and more relaxed, kind of like when you're actually at a jazz club and you feel a little bit more bass. The way the speakers in the room is set up, it sounds more visceral. This plays into that sound profile more. So it's just one of those things where because it colors the sound, you're going to hear things that you'll enjoy more, perhaps, than what you're used to. And at the same time, if certain tracks don't complement that sound signature, it may not be as rewarding. This is the only fatiguing part of this headphone, is stuff recorded in that frequency that's more heavily focused. You know, certain electric guitars can be a little bit forward as well. So it just depends on the note. Now there's a song called Your Secrets from Ranji and Ghost Rider. It's an EDM song, and I usually use that as one of my tracks for demoing or auditioning speakers. It's not recorded well, and typically I don't like listening to that song as much on headphones. I usually have more neutral headphones, and the way that song is recorded is when you don't have a visceral bass presentation paired with the song's somewhat sibilant voice recording, it's not the best pairing for headphones, and some speakers can mask that because they have such breadth in the room and that bass can hit so hard. Because of this emphasized bass and because of the particular dips that this has in the upper treble, it dulls the sibilance, and I got the visceralness back that I liked in the bass that I typically enjoy on speakers. Then you factor in that this track has really complex portions, creating a lot of macro dynamics. It really shined on the Caspian, and a lot of headphones, some headphones I have that are more expensive than this, don't do as well with that track. So it's really one of those things, it's kind of like a hidden gem where you find some of the right songs and it just absolutely sings on the Caspian. As far as treble goes, so if you, again, I mentioned this earlier, if you like cranking up treble, you may not find that you're getting the extension that you're looking for. It does kind of fall off, but there are tracks where that sound profile is more rewarding. It sounds immersive because of the bass presentation, but I'm not getting like the sparkly, airy, clinical sound that something like a Planar would do in this price range. You know, when you compare it to a Hi-Fi-Man Edition XS, which is also $500, totally different sound signature. The Hi-Fi-Man is more lean. The mid-range is relatively flat, but it also sounds a little bit more sterile. Now, the Hi-Fi-Man XS is more analytical. I feel like it's more nuanced, especially in the upper mids and trebles. So you get a better, more granular resolution. You know, like everything is more finely presented to you, whereas this is just smooth over slightly. So to summarize, I think based off what they were going for, they are going for a comfy sound. And had that 2K lift be not as I guess, forward or strong, it would have executed that philosophy almost perfectly. Luckily, it's very easy to drop 2K down by only a few decibels, and again, this is based off my unit. I don't think this is the perfect headphone at $500. In fact, a lot of people aren't going to buy multiple $500 to $1,000 headphones. Some people, like myself, start building up a collection. So while I don't think this is the only headphone you own, I think it does something fairly unique, so I wouldn't completely rule it out. There's surprisingly a small, I don't know if this is just because of how many are getting sold, but there really aren't a lot of secondhand Caspians out there. And the user feedback, for the most part, is generally positive as well. I think a couple people did complain about the voicing in that 2K region, but overall people are very happy with the headphone. It is very comfortable for me to wear. I do love the way it presents bass because it's fun, and even though it's not fully articulated and textured, that heft just sounds good for a lot of tracks. And you kind of, when you don't listen to music in an analytical way, you just want to jam out and play stuff, it can be really, really rewarding and relaxing to own. So where it stacks up on value, it's tough sell against the XS. I think this is built exceptionally well, and it's very comfortable to wear. It's open back, so there's no sound isolation, so it's a matter of if you need that or not. I think purely on value, the Sennheiser 6XX and 650 are a little bit better, but they have a much stronger clamp and they don't hit bass the way this does. If you feel like the 6XX or 650 or 600 are just lacking some punch and you want something that has, you know, a fairly smooth mid-range but more depth to your bass, you're just missing that slam, this is still a good option to consider. So hopefully you found the video helpful. Like I said, I'll have links in the description below in case you're interested, but don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at a future video. Thank you so much for making it to the end, and I'll see you next time. Bye.